For today, let me invite on stage Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman of Institute of Supply Chain Management, to deliver his keynote address, which is themed The Emergence of Intelligent, Connected and Interdependent Supply Chains.
The theme of the Webvent is the emergence of intelligent, connected, and interdependent supply chains. And when you look this in the context of what's happening in the world or what has happened in the world, you have seen that the world has seen an unprecedented disruption due to the black swan event called as pandemic or COVID-19. And this has magnified the disruption as in subject of interest for academicians as well as a. So I think these are also certain kind of disruption that one needs to take into account their own supply chain. As I said, supply chain operation today is under unprecedented attack by pandemics like situation of COVID-19. But this is not the first time that the disruption has been there. You see floods, war, natural disasters, trade wars, macroeconomic disruption, financial crisis, all of them were one way a reminder for building a supply chain which is resilient enough to transgress boundaries and serve customer. In fact, when I look at supply chain, I clearly find that it would have been an interesting web of connectivity between various nodes of supply chain spanning across geographies across the world. And this is why we got our goods and services from anywhere and everywhere, and we saw the unprecedented globalization that happened. And this pandemic has really questioned that. It has said, and if you really look at the pandemic, we found that there are three kind of major disruption that happened. One, material shortages. Two, disruption in your planning. Three, disruption in your labor, logistics, and storage. And I think this is what supply chain is all about. And when such dramatic disruptions happen, you see, I've been talking to a lot of supply chain heads across the globe. And even in our webinar, when people have come and talked about it, they said that this has taught us certain lesson. And the first lesson is that we try to see the impact of this pandemic on the nearby markets, and we became very, very nearby in our approach and short run in our approach and daily in our approaches. And we came together in war room to discuss how do we secure our supplies to the customers so that the customer in the zones which are safe find the products and essential supplies. Two, how do we secure our logistics and warehousing? How do we secure our labor? And I think this teaches an amazing lesson that when everything is good, the going is good, everything goes on. But when difficult times come, there are need for certain strategies. And when I'm looking at this and look at a lot of literature review coming from practitioners, not the academic literature review, I find that there is an unprecedented rise in the way technology has been used. And technology is supposed to be driving the whole digitalization as well as supply chain end-to-end integration. And when I say it's end-to-end integration, we have found that technology-led end-to-end integrations, companies which had this had an amazing resilience to the problems of the pandemic. But those companies which did not really think of end-to-end technology integration had huge problems in securing their supply bases, securing their transportation, securing their workers, securing their raw materials, engineering their product and finishing product. I think what it says is that, and we have been hearing about this, if you look at supply chain of the past and why this problem of integration is very important, because we always talked about we are integrating our supply chain, aligning our supply chain, we're bringing a dynamic alignment in supply chain. But what did it mean? It has two kinds of alignment issues that was there. We had end-to-end means from the factory to the supplier. Even there, production planning, engineering, manufacturing, and strategic sourcing were in silos. If you look at on the outbound side, you found distribution, logistics, warehousing, and planning and customer service they were all disintegrated. They were lived in their own silos. And when we came back to the organization, which really was the core of the supply chain activities which deliver goods to the customer and services, we found that there was a lot of silos within the marketing, within the finance, within the logistics, within the product development, within the strategy, and hence they all had their fascinating this thing. We have all heard of there was a finance plan, then there's a sales plan, and there's a supply chain plan. And when we say that there's a finance plan, there's a sales plan, there's a supply chain plan, everybody thinks that there should be one plan. No, there has to be a proper synchronization of these plans, taking into account the constraints and aspiration of the businesses, the growth of the businesses, and the matrices which can measure this growth and performance of the supply chain, like inventory turns. Now, given this, how is technology going to change this? And I think one of the fundamental challenge that happens is planning. And when I talk about planning, we were very much, into our Excel sheets or even the ERP of the past, which got the data and which was deterministic in terms, time series or Salesforce composite at the maximum, or rolling plans that are inbuilt in, were just a kind of extrapolation of the past to the future. A supply chain would have been very different, very, very different within an organization. And when you really look at the strategic fit within an organization to look at what planning should be, you may find that there are so many other ways of looking at it. There's a agile supply chain, there's an efficient supply chain, there's an uncertain supply chain, and there is a completely irregular supply chain. You have to really map this different kind of series that are available in your data to fit the right kind of methodology. But what did we do? We use rolling plans, moving averages, exponential smoothing, and Holt and Winter model, and said these are the fitting this thing. We did not really have any understanding. And when we started moving into the COVID part of it, we realized that these are just deterministic approaches. How do we make it more resilient? And how do we understand the resiliency? So I think there are two elements to the resiliency that needs to be captured, because there are a large number of components of supply chain planning and supply chain optimization who says that the forecasting is that. I think there is a need to understand even deterministic planning to some extent in a very stable product where it is a functional product may work together and is working together. You look at the food businesses, and as they are coming to their normal, there's certain amount of deterministic behavior that's returning back, at least in India, and I saw the Southeast Asia data and even Dubai data, I'm seeing that is happening. But there is an element that has come about in a big way, and that is that because of this various degrees of return to the normal and the incidence of the disease and the behavior towards the incidence of disease, you need an umbrella, a range of understanding of the demand patterns and also demand, amplitudes, so that you understand the range. It is not 100 units, so it can be sold between 50 and 150. So you have a probability distribution function which can actually understand, and hence this could be a very strong scenario building for the future as we move into the next phase of COVID-19. I would not call normal, but next phase of COVID-19, which is almost like building up resilience for the next phase. It is important to understand the incidence of the disease and the impact of the economy on you, on your particular locality as well as the country, so that you can build a kind of a probability distribution function which ranges not into a single number but within a range, so that whatever be the changes, you are resilient to the planning. That's the first element of resilience. But the second element of resilience that needs, and I think this is where we need to start thinking, is how do we really bring an amazing amount of visibility? You see artificial intelligence, Internet of the Things, blockchains and big data. I don't want to get into what they are, but they all bring about a framework, a digital framework to help you bring visibility, transparency, and mapping into your supply chain. And as you do this, you may be better off than this. And why do I say this? I've been seeing that large number of organizations who have been moving towards digitization even today has a silos approach. You may be mapping your supplies and you may be mapping your demand, but you're not mapping end-to-end digitalization or end-to-end supply chain alignment or integration. What does it mean? It does not mean that you move from the factory to supplier or factory to the last customer. It means that from customer to the factory to the last tier of supplier. And we have been seeing this, that once the crisis came in, the very first element of the risk that emanated was into the tiers of supply chain. For instance, there are so many tires, 600 tires for some automobile sector, 800, 100, 1,000 tires. And when you look at bill of material from a production perspective, then those bill of materials will have their own bill of material, and then those bill of material will have their own bill of material, saying that there are multiple tires in the multiple of hundreds. And how do you understand what, even if there are disruption, how do you understand the technology with SaaS cloud-based technology, which allows computing, machine learning, and AI allows you the mass of computing, your Internet of the Things, the sensors connect everything, and the blockchain, which is a ledger which provides a framework for connectivity and alignment, can allow you, along with your understanding of the geography of your suppliers, a complete mapping of where, what lies in what form, at what stage, and what constraint. There could be a cash strip supplier, and you may be there. In fact, Ford found during the tsunami in Japan that it was a supplier in the 23rd tier with 2% of the value addition to the total supplies, was not functional, and it sent the production to the halt for 3 to 4 weeks. And I think that this is very critical. And to understand this, how do you build a stress test? Do company really look at stress tests for the supplier? I think beyond the tier 1 or tier 2 suppliers, we are very happy not to go. And I think most of the smaller supplier tiers also depend on one single tier, and they also supply to multiple tiers at times, and that could be a situation. How do you bring visibility into your geography of supplier bases and your whole problem of securing your materials in order to keep your production running? Just not manufacturing and labor would be important. So look at this, how the labor is important, but securing labor is important by securing material is important. You need to have visibility. You need to know, how do we move now outbound? What kind of trucks do you need? How much do you need? Where do you need? When do you need? And warehouses you need? And how do you really marry them to the retail frameworks? What kind of data do you get? How do you capture the data, the demand signals? And I think one approach which is very interesting that is emerging is DDMRP, but they capture sales orders. Sales order is not sufficient. You need to have a predictive analytic based forecasting, or even deterministic and probability forecasting, along with causal forecasting of what is promotion, what is discount, how is the economy behaving. Outside in factor and inside out in terms of promotions are to be bundled to get a single number called a single program. I think building up this kind of a connected planning is going to be the first basis for resilience. And first basis of resilience would provide you 3 basic advantages. First, you can plan better. Maybe you will have mistakes, you will have errors, you can plan and forecast better. Second, you can know where lies what. You can actually bring resiliency and start dealing with this. What are the alternative sources, alternative trusts, alternative warehouses that you need, alternative tier of supply that you need. You will get in advance. You need to build this capability to see that you manage this. And fourth, as we go ahead, as we really go ahead in future, we find that waste-free, sustainability, child labor, energy efficiency, use of lesser use of hazardous material, gender inequity, all these needs to be captured in the supply chain, because your businesses are going to be funded by ESG funds, and ESG is a very important compliant for all funds, even those who are sitting in warehousing. And you see the new new funding, they are already ESG compliant. In India, around 38 to 39% of the total funding is ESG funding, meaning that a large chunk of new players which have come as a large industrial spaces are under industrial funding. And I think this will be second thing. We will be starting to prepare for natural disasters. We may try to mitigate them and also understand them. And if you know this is it. The second question that will come in is geopolitical, just not because of the pandemic. I don't want to get into geopolitics in a very functional way, but I can tell you that geopolitics of the world towards moving towards the right wings, being more nationalistic, being hegemonistic, and being, power hungry. The world is going to see a large amount of disruption, maybe because of geopolitical hegemonies and ambitions. How are you going to secure yourself? And this is why I say it is more of the geopolitical factors that you can forecast and you can understand in the future to build up something called as near shoring, diversified shoring. Even in the single source, you can map, you can look at alternate sources. Alternate sources should be nearby. Building up alternate sources are important. And I think this pandemic provides a very important element of this thinking. If the time taken to recover is more than time needed to survive, then please start looking at this supply base as redundant. If you cannot recover in the time zone of survival, then you better start building up a sourcing base, securing an alternate sourcing base in the whole system. And similarly, what I would say is that as you get interconnected, and there's a small saying, there's a professor, Yossi Sefi, very well known name in resilience theory in supply chain. And I was reading his new book called Abnormal, and I think he makes a very fundamental system. He says that sometimes we forget and we correlate transparency and visibility to saying that we move from make, plan, and deliver, a plan, make, and deliver. That is, we move linear across the verticals, echelons of supply chain, and we think that we have become very, very distinct. A transporter or 3PL is very happy because he can have one technology which can interconnect, and because he is the one which is integrated across the supply chain as a 3PL, not the fragmented one. They will not survive in any case, but he can really manage. But if you look at from an organization perspective, I have multimodal requirement for my logistics. I have multiple, warehousing requirement. I have a multiple retail unit. I may have to go omni-channel. I may have to go e-commerce way. I have to go physical way. I have to go physical way. And I have to be really prepared for multiplicity of channels that fragments my product delivery and increases variability. How am I going to track them? And tracking them requires sensors, tracking them requires blockchains, tracking them requires an amazing amount of data that emanates from him and this thing. And this is why the last element in my talk, I would say, is that are we building up the new capability and new talent for the future supply chain? I think I've seen a lot of reluctance, cutting down your budgets for training, not trying to understand what it is, but the new capabilities are digital, technological, and physical. And digital, physical capabilities have to be built up in a big way. Analytical, critical thinking, chain management, ability to take risk, and ability to understand the geography, dimensions of geography and causal factor that affects the supply chain. A supply chain guy would have to think. He should be able to put the data in the most beautiful way, visualization, so that all the element of the supply chain leaders and all those who participate in SOP and IBP can see whether it's worth doing this or not. Nobody even captures the cost to serve. Nobody captures the total cost of a business. We look at silos cost and compare it and go. The time is here to have a physical, digital, end-to-end integration, looking at the total cost of business by increasing the total supply chain profitability and building a talent base which is futuristic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I think an amazing start and wonderful insights on how to build resilient, secure, reliable, and sustainable supply chains. Thank you, Dr. Singh. It was indeed hearing you.